Why another pandemic could quietly reshape your savings. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the world has slowed down again. Flights are being cancelled. Stores feel tense. People are quietly panic buying. Your phone fills with economic headlines. Markets swing violently before breakfast. But this time, something feels different. You already lived through uncertainty once. So instead of asking, will this affect the economy? Your mind asks a much more personal question. What happens to my money if the system freezes again? You check your savings account. The numbers are still there. But deep down, you're no longer sure what those numbers actually mean anymore. Because during moments like these, people discover something uncomfortable. Savings are not protected from the system. They are deeply tied to it. Most people believe financial safety comes from accumulation. Earn more. Save more. Invest more. Build a larger buffer. But large-scale crises reveal a deeper truth. The real danger is not always losing money directly. Sometimes the danger is watching money quietly lose meaning. Pandemics do not only disrupt health systems. They disrupt human behavior, economic confidence, supply chains, consumption patterns, government policy, and ultimately, purchasing power. Modern economies depend on movement. People moving, goods moving, money moving, confidence moving. And when movement slows suddenly, governments and institutions begin reacting aggressively to prevent collapse. That reaction changes the financial environment around your savings. Not overnight, but gradually, quietly, systemically. Human beings are psychologically wired to trust stability. When routines repeat long enough, the brain assumes permanence. Salary arrives. Bills get paid. Groceries stay stocked. Fuel is available. Markets recover. Normality begins to feel guaranteed. But uncertainty changes human behavior faster than almost anything else. The moment people sense instability, financial psychology shifts. Consumers spend differently. Investors react emotionally. Families become defensive. Businesses delay expansion. Lenders reduce risk. Fear slows circulation. And modern economies rely heavily on circulation. Behavioral economists often describe this as expectation-driven behavior. People do not wait for complete collapse before reacting. They react to the possibility of collapse. And once millions of people begin acting defensively at the same time, the economy itself begins changing shape. This is why crises often feel psychological before they feel mathematical. Because perception spreads first. Then the numbers follow. Here's where the mechanics become important. During major disruptions, governments usually attempt to stabilize the economy by increasing liquidity. Lower interest rates, emergency stimulus, central bank asset purchases, financial support programs. The objective is simple. Keep money moving. Because when economic circulation stops completely, businesses fail rapidly and unemployment accelerates. But increasing liquidity while production slows creates another effect. Inflation pressure. And inflation changes the real value of savings. A person may still see the same number in their account, but the purchasing power behind that number may slowly weaken. For example, if inflation averages 8% while your savings grow at 1%, the real value of your money declines. Not visibly, not dramatically, but mathematically. This is what makes inflation psychologically deceptive. The number itself may remain stable, but the economic strength behind the number changes quietly over time. And because humans think emotionally in nominal terms instead of real purchasing power, many people underestimate the effect until daily life becomes noticeably more expensive. Now zoom out further. Pandemics do not affect every financial group equally. Some people hold appreciating assets. Others depend entirely on wages. Some businesses scale digitally during disruptions. Others require physical movement to survive. Some households own investments that recover with liquidity expansion. Others experience rising living costs without comparable income growth. This creates asymmetric recovery. Markets may rebound while households continue struggling. Asset prices may rise while purchasing power falls. And over time, crises can accelerate wealth gaps already present inside the system. History repeatedly shows this pattern. Large disruptions often redistribute financial resilience. not always through dramatic collapse, but through slower structural shifts, inflation, policy responses, asset appreciation, labor changes, and behavioral adaptation. This is why understanding systems matters. Because money does not exist independently from psychology, policy, and collective behavior. It moves through all three simultaneously. At some point, financially aware people stop viewing money as just income and savings. They begin viewing it as positioning. They realize financial stability is not only about how much money exists inside an account. It is also about adaptability, discipline, resilience, decision-making, and understanding how systems behave under stress. This changes the way uncertainty feels. Instead of reacting emotionally to every crisis headline, they begin asking calmer questions. How exposed am I? How liquid am I? How diversified am I? How dependent am I on one system continuing perfectly? Because long-term financial survival is rarely built on prediction alone. It is built on preparation and behavioral control. The goal is not paranoia. The goal is awareness. Another pandemic would not only test healthcare systems. It would test financial psychology. How people spend. How governments intervene. How markets price uncertainty. How households respond to fear. And somewhere inside all of that movement, the meaning of savings changes too. Not because money disappears instantly, but because economic systems reshape the environment around money itself. That is why understanding financial mechanics matters. Not to panic, not to predict catastrophe, but to see clearly. Because the people who navigate uncertainty best are usually not the loudest, fastest, or most emotional. They are often the calmest observers of how systems actually work. Strange things happen during uncertainty. People say they want to be careful with money. But often, they begin spending more emotionally than ever before. Not always on luxury. Not always on status. Sometimes it's food, subscriptions, small online purchases, impulse upgrades, comfort spending, doom scrolling into late-night shopping carts. During periods of economic fear, people often become less financially rational precisely when they believe they are trying to survive. And at first, that makes no sense. Shouldn't fear make people more disciplined? Not necessarily. Because financial behavior is rarely controlled by logic alone. It is deeply connected to emotion, stress, identity, and the brain's attempt to regain psychological control during unstable periods. And once you understand that mechanism, you begin seeing economic crises very differently. Most people think reckless spending comes from irresponsibility. But behavioral economics suggests something more complicated. Many forms of emotional spending are actually attempts at emotional regulation. In uncertain environments, the brain searches for relief, control, comfort, distraction, certainty, reward, and spending can temporarily provide all five. This becomes especially powerful during pandemics or economic shocks because uncertainty attacks the human nervous system continuously. Health fears, job insecurity, isolation, inflation, constant negative news cycles. The brain remains under pressure for extended periods. And under prolonged stress, human beings tend to shift from long-term optimization towards short-term emotional survival. This is where financial discipline begins quietly breaking down. Not because people suddenly become irrational, but because the brain changes priorities under stress. Psychological explanation. Human beings are not naturally designed for prolonged uncertainty. The brain prefers predictable environments because predictability lowers cognitive strain. When the future feels stable, people plan rationally. They delay gratification, budget carefully, think long-term, evaluate trade-offs logically. But fear compresses time horizons. Behavioral economists call this present bias amplification. Under stress, immediate emotional relief becomes more valuable than future financial outcomes. This is why people may simultaneously feel anxious about money while also spending impulsively. The spending is not always about the object itself. It is often about reducing psychological discomfort. A small purchase creates a brief dopamine response, a feeling of normality, a temporary sense of reward during chaos. And digital systems amplify this behavior aggressively. One-click purchasing, algorithmic advertising, personalized recommendations. Endless scrolling environments. During isolation and uncertainty, many people become emotionally vulnerable to consumption loops designed to exploit attention and emotion. The result is subtle financial leakage. Not one catastrophic decision, but hundreds of emotionally driven micro-decisions accumulating over time. Now here's where the numbers become dangerous. Most emotional spending feels small in isolation. $10 here, $20 there, a few convenience purchases, subscription stacking, delivery fees, impulse online shopping. Individually, these seem harmless. But financially, repeated emotional spending compounds quietly. For example, spending an extra $15 per day during a stressful year may not feel significant emotionally. But mathematically, that becomes over $5,000 annually. Now imagine that money invested instead over long periods. The issue is not occasional enjoyment. The issue is unconscious repetition. Because emotional spending often operates below awareness. And during periods of uncertainty, unconscious habits intensify. This is why crises can quietly damage long-term financial progress without people fully realizing where the leakage occurred. Not through one terrible decision, but through sustained emotional behavior patterns. Economic fear changes entire populations simultaneously. Consumers behave differently. Businesses market differently. Governments intervene differently. Markets become emotionally reactive. Fear itself becomes economically contagious. During pandemics, this creates strange contradictions. Some people stop spending entirely. Others begin panic spending. Some hoard cash. Others chase risky investments hoping to escape uncertainty. Financial extremes increase because emotional stability decreases. And companies understand this well. Entire industries are built around emotional consumption. Convenience economies. Entertainment subscriptions. Fast delivery systems. Short-form dopamine platforms. In uncertain environments, consumption becomes psychological self-medication. This is why economic shocks often reshape consumer behavior permanently. People are not only reacting to circumstances, they are adapting emotionally to prolonged instability. And those adaptations influence markets, inflation patterns, investing behavior, and long-term household wealth outcomes. Identity shift. At some point, financially disciplined people begin viewing spending differently. They stop asking, "Can I afford this?" and begin asking, "What emotional state is driving this decision?" That shift changes everything. Because awareness interrupts automatic behavior. They begin recognizing stress spending, fear spending, boredom spending, status spending, and anxiety-driven consumption loops. Not with shame, but with observation. They understand money decisions are often emotional signals disguised as financial choices. And this awareness improves investing behavior too. Because investing during uncertainty requires emotional regulation more than constant prediction. The investors who survive volatile periods are not always the smartest. Often, they are the most psychologically stable. They understand that panic and euphoria are both dangerous financial environments, and they build systems designed to reduce emotional interference. Automatic investing, emergency reserves, long-term allocation frameworks, controlled exposure to fear-driven media cycles. Not because emotions disappear, but because systems protect decision-making during emotional periods. Economic fear changes human behavior in subtle ways. Not only through markets or inflation, but through everyday decisions people barely notice. A purchase for comfort, a subscription for distraction, an impulsive investment driven by anxiety, a financial choice made simply to feel temporary control. This is why understanding financial psychology matters. Because money is never purely mathematical. It moves through emotion first. And during uncertainty, emotional awareness becomes a financial advantage. The goal is not perfection. The goal is not eliminating enjoyment. And the goal is not becoming emotionally detached from money. The goal is understanding how fear quietly influences decisions before those decisions compound over time. Because once you understand the psychology behind spending, you stop seeing financial discipline as restriction and start seeing it as clarity. Subscribe to Sterling Invests for deeper analysis on investing, behavioral economics, financial psychology, and the hidden systems shaping modern wealth.